Places We'll Go show. Once again, we have a fabulous guest with us, Mel Matson, Marketing Director of a co-op. Now, I only met Mel a couple of months ago, and I shamelessly pitched her as soon as the speeches and Q&A were over. It was a Wackle dinner. Una King was speaking, brilliant spokesperson for diversity, Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion at Snap, former politician. Anyway, I actually thought that Mel stole the show a little bit with her question and the way she spoke, and very specifically around ADHD. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But what an illustrious career! It's very specifically in retail marketing. So I think the list runs something like Safeway, Sainsbury's, Asda, Iceland, Boots, Co-op, with a little smidge of dunnhumby in the middle. And so you have had, you like to, well, no, there's probably Lidl, Aldi, a few others. But I mean, in terms of the sort of the retail marketing bingo, you're pretty well advanced. So you've had an amazing career, and we're going to get into that and find out a little bit about how it's rolled for you, Mel. And I know it won't have always been perfect at all times, a bit squiggly along the way. But it's an absolute pleasure to have you on, and I know that you will give us lots of great insight, us and our listeners, lots of great insight. So very welcome to the show, Mel.
Thank you. Really, really excited to be here.
Oh, Mel, honestly, it's great to have you on. Let's dive right in. I mean, clearly we continue to have turbulent times. How are you doing? How are you feeling?
Well, do you know what? I was speaking to this about someone with someone last night, actually. I am one of these people who don't really feel things at the time. I'm very resilient in the moment, and it'll only be when I stop and look back that I'll go, oh my goodness, actually there was a lot going on there. It was full on, there's a lot going on in the economy. I'm not allowed the heating on anymore, and I would still have it on in the winter, in the summer if I could. But all of that going on. There's quite a lot going on at work. There's quite a few changes happening in co-op at the moment, and so just a lot going on. And I am a little like a swan. I glide, and then I'll look back and go, oh goodness, lots was happening.
But would you have it any other way?
No, I wouldn't. I do think it's a bit of a superpower of mine, because I think I can just get on with stuff, and I need the pace, I need the change. Actually, I need something always going on. The turbulence creates a good environment for me. Actually, I feel it's when I'm at my best.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about that. I mean, when you talk about swanning, as it were, I mean, how does that work? I mean, how are we able to sort of learn from that? Give us some of your top tips.
Well, do you know what? I first kind of started thinking about the swan analogy when I realised how much I loved retail. When I started doing my Saturday job at Marks and Spencer in the food hall,
so that's another retailer that we could tick off.
Another retailer you could tick off, yeah. And I do count Tesco in there, even though it was for dunnhumby. So that's the other one. And I think what I really loved about it was that behind the scenes, it is like the legs kicking, absolutely kicking, but on the surface it's about presenting that kind of smooth gliding image, and that has always stuck with me ever since I kind of thought of it, and that's how I kind of that's how I suppose I think of myself as a leader when I'm at my best, is that the kind of actually, I've always been told I've not got a very brilliant poker face, but actually I'm together, but there might be a hell of a lot going on up here and in the background. I think I set a lot of stall in that, actually, and actually moving to the virtual world, and although we're kind of back in hybrid now, that's been a thing in itself, hasn't it? Because it is literally you on the screen, and everything else can be going on around you, and actually the multitasking that happens these days is another kind of legs kicking under the surface, I think. So actually finding a way to organise yourself and manage that but still come across as the kind of, you know, bouncy person is quite a thing, I think, very important.
Yeah, somebody said to me a long time ago, make it look easy. And I think that is a thing, but both for your own, probably for your own progression, but also for the confidence of your team in you as a leader. So you're probably born for retail, really, because it is that ultimate and fast-paced environment. So I suppose, is it very deliberate that you've plotted a career in a retail environment?
I think, I don't know that it was deliberate to start with. I mean, it was literally the Saturday job at M&S kicked it off. And I think I knew quite quickly. I can remember, as you know, kind of going through A levels and making choices about university. I just knew it needed to be a retail management degree. I didn't even consider anything else, actually. And over the years, I've looked back and kind of thought, you know, why didn't I do law, or why didn't I do sociology, or other things that interested me? But it was just that absolute impulsive instinct. Actually, it's retail, and that's what I go for. So I suppose in some ways it was deliberate, because I've relentlessly applied in the early part of my career. It was relentlessly to every single retailer going for a grad scheme job. And I think I was quite taken early on versus some of my friends at university who were going for other types of jobs. I loved the structure that was kind of, I suppose, part of the approach in terms of here are the core competencies, and you need to have these core competencies, and if you've got those, then actually they're incredibly transferable. And that just felt like, and I've never really thought about that before, actually, but that, I think, provided me with the structure I probably needed. And that's how I've always viewed retail, is actually I've got a set of core competencies that are incredibly transferable, but the retail side of it is what I like, because just the fast-paced nature of it appeals. And you know, I did the Sainsbury's grad scheme in store, the kind of trainee manager scheme, and I absolutely adored that, because it was the behind the scenes, and you go out and you're on show. But actually, I've kind of found my place in more of a support office function in marketing, because you still get the fast pacedness, but I think the creativity is what I crave as well, and that's kind of what I've found over time. But it is retail that appeals for sure, and I think that is that snappiness.
You know, Mel, it's interesting, because I think that the perfect training ground, even for every marketer, should tend to actually be on the front line in retail for a stint in time. Because how do you genuinely understand the voice and be the voice of the customer if you're not in the cold face of it, and understand the issues that take place, and as you say, perhaps some of the chaos that infuses in those sort of retail environments?
Yeah. Well, I couldn't agree more, actually. I just I think there was so much stall put in me when I went into support office roles, because I was able to talk about that on the ground experience, and it's kind of stood for a lot throughout my career.
Yeah, for sure. But tell us. Go on, Mark.
I was going to say, I'd love to. You said two things which really have stood out: that you sort of thrive on turbulence, but you need the structure. Now, to some people would say, well, how do you sort of reconcile the two? But I have an inkling that that's really what it's all about, isn't it? You need those two things simultaneously to thrive. Is that about
right?
I
think so, because I think when you don't have, or for me, when I don't have some structure, then I think, and I've learned this more recently, I think, as I've had, my ADHD diagnosis, if I don't have any structure, then my brain won't function in the best way possible. If I've got some structure, and I can create my own structure, it takes me some time, but if I've got some structure, then off I go. And actually, I think if you've got a turbulent environment and it feels chaotic because there isn't any structure, then that's when it can be quite mind-blowing.
No, I can relate wholeheartedly there to that one, Mel. running a small organization. I'm not sure if I ever get structure, and certainly turbulence most of the time. But Mel, let me rewind a little bit. Of course, you got into retail and what have you, but perhaps tell us a little bit about growing up. What was it like?
Oh, well, we moved actually quite a lot as children. Our family moved quite a lot with my dad's job, so I didn't. I probably didn't create a massive base of friends, because we kind of moved from town to town over time, and so I think I probably was quite comfortable being on my own from quite an early age. So I made friends, but I equally would. Just when we moved on, I also kind of moved on. So I think actually probably that has led to me being quite highly adaptable. I always wanted to be doing stuff. So I think you'd have me disappear all day and no one would know where I was, because I was always out and about, probably with lots of energy to burn off. I got a job as soon as I could. That's what I remember, was just trying to earn some money and have just things that were of interest, really. Yeah, I mean, a very kind of normal childhood, I think, and probably just kind of went and did what everyone else did. I didn't have any kind of grand ambitions to do anything. I kind of went to school. A-levels were the next thing after GCSEs, and then everyone was kind of applying for degrees. So I suppose I didn't really have a view. So in some ways I kind of fell into things, but I can also look back and say, but actually the things that I did go for were absolutely just the things that were passion points for me at the time, and I kind of stuck with them.
It's interesting. You make it sound like it's very, very normal and you fell into things, and so, but clearly you've had a lot of success, and so there must be an underlying drive and ambition, I guess. So what do you think really fires your success?
There is definitely an underlying drive, and I've reconciled this over time, actually, because whenever I had to fill in a form or have a conversation, certainly earlier in my career, about am I ambitious, I would always kind of say, not particularly. No, I don't really have any particular ambitions. And I would always be challenged on it, actually, really, because you're very clear about what you want and where you're going. But I genuinely think that drive just comes from an underlying need to do and be involved. And I think the way my mind works is I make lots of connections, and so this will feel very natural to do this, and then, well, what about this, and what about this? And so I think it happens quite organically, and so I suppose for many people that would be described as ambition. I suppose I just never thought I had that underlying ambition, but it comes more from that, just keep the drive going and keep it going. And I think it comes from just a sense of wanting to be involved, having an interest, and probably not sitting still very much at all.
Well, maybe it certainly comes through with the range of organizations that you've worked with. I'd like to dig into that a little bit, because there's clearly a tussle and a tension that people go through as to whether they kind of remain in organizations for a longer period of time, or whether they actually should get a good cross-section of experience with different companies. And clearly you've gone down one route versus the other. I'd just like to kind of maybe get your take on that, as to maybe the motivations for that, and perhaps what the benefits of that have been.
Well, so I think again, I didn't set out for it to be like that. Actually, I think certainly in the early part of my career, it's funny, isn't it, how things set you on a certain path? Because I was with Safeway and I loved Safeway, and then Morrison's bought Safeway, and Morrison's moved up north, and I didn't want to move up north. And I suppose that probably made me I learned quite early on that I could be relatively blasé about, well, this happened, you know, a redundancy happened. There was, and it was what it was. So I suppose that's probably set me on a certain view of the world. And you know, then I was at Dunnhumby, and I really did enjoy Dunnhumby, and I will always be grateful for the grounding that gave me in customer, and that's Tesco influence as well, actually, but that customer data view, and really thinking from that behavioural perspective as is a kind of a founding pillar, I think, of how I think. But then I think after that, I actually had quite a long time at Sainsbury's, and I think probably if I look back now, and then I look at some of the moves that have been kind of subsequent, kind of following that, is that actually that was probably a period of time where, with hindsight, ADHD started playing more of a role. And not always actually in the best way, because I think, you know, if I looking back, I think that sometimes the way that I thought didn't always fit with some of the people that I worked with, and actually that has definitely played a part in some of the moves that I've made. But equally, I am very proud of the kind of experience I've got of different organisations, and I wouldn't necessarily change it, because I have felt and experienced quite a range of cultures, and I'm very clear about what I like and what doesn't work for me so well. And I do sometimes look at people who've been in an organisation for a long time with envy, actually, because I also think, wow, if you find that place and it really works for you, then that kind of sense of belonging and family, I think, is phenomenal. And actually, I have experienced that too in organisations, but just not had that kind of longevity in terms of feeling it and experiencing it. So I don't think there's a right or a wrong. What I would say is I have experienced people who've worked in organisations for a long time, and I do think that, you know, I think that they have to be aware of what else is going on out there, because otherwise I think you can have only one way of doing it and one perspective. And I've definitely joined organisations that have had a lot of people who've been there for a long time, and it is harder to change the culture of a team when that is the case. It's harder to get them to think in a new way or a broader way, and so it's a balance of both, isn't it, really? I think in the end it's about having a broad mind, and I think, like I say at the beginning, because I was grounded in, well, this job no longer exists because Morrison's is moving up north, I think that probably broadened my mind to thinking, well, then there are lots of different places out there, and I can go and experience different places.
What a wonderful attitude. Most people will be made redundant at least once in their life.
Yeah.
And at the time, it feels like the world has caved in, but genuinely, it can be a great springboard into new adventures. So thanks for talking to that. I've skirted around a little bit. You've raised it. I did want to talk a bit about your journey with ADHD. We've had, by the way, already, I think this has been a fantastic advert for neurodiversity. What you said, which I'm a huge proponent of, and that, you know, there needs to be more normalized conversation around neurodiversity. But tell us a bit about your journey so far, Mel.
Well, I mean, it literally started right at the beginning of 2021, when my nephew was diagnosed with a number of learning disabilities, and one of the things that was on his diagnosis was ADHD. And so I started reading about all of these different diversities, neurodiversities. And as I read more about ADHD, I was kind of like, oh, I do that, and I do that, and oh, I do that. And I read more and more, and there was an article that I stumbled across in The Guardian called "The Lost Girls," chaotic and curious. That they kind of the missed red flags that haunt them, and I read that and had quite an emotional reaction to it, actually, because it essentially described my life, which was, you know, as a kid, always on the go, all, you know, highly energetic, and that was never enough. And probably quite emotional with it as well, in terms of an emotional roller coaster, all the way through to actually being what would be seen as a high achiever at work, but having to constantly work in order to keep up, stay on top, but almost not realizing that you're doing that until you get to the point where it's pretty much burnout, because you're never switching off. And I think from there, I read and I read and I read, and was just absolutely determined that this was me. And so I went and got myself a private diagnosis, because I did go to my GP, who told me there was a 17-month waiting list for an assessment. And fortunately, I was able to pay for myself privately. And I suppose from there, the relief actually was phenomenal. And actually, I think it's made me, for the first time in my adult life, I was 43 when I was diagnosed, really actually accept myself for who I am. And I already feel like I am reaping the benefits in terms of how I turn up and show up. Not that I wasn't authentic before, but I feel like I'm far more grounded in who I am now. And it doesn't mean that I don't still have challenges. So I've actually chosen to take medication, which essentially balances out or helps to regulate the dopamine in my brain, so that it's not kind of so boom and bust. And what that means is that I have more ability to organise myself, my thoughts, but I think probably it's more than anything, it's given perspective. It helps me with perspective, because it works and it slows down time. So there's just more time to think and make choices. And it doesn't mean that I don't still have some challenges. And for me, and I think it's different for everyone, but for me, I am, a superpower of mine is being able to verbalise and articulate my thoughts. But if I have to take those thoughts and write them down, it still takes me quite a long time to organise my thoughts. But had I said it to someone, I've done it, and I've got it out there. So I am still learning how to navigate some of that. But in knowing it, it's given me super strength and belief in myself. And because I'm no longer beating myself up for some of those things, I guess it's as simple as that. But also, I think the bit that I've absolutely loved about this is it's also, I suppose, helped me identify my superpowers, which is definitely language that I've only really come across as I've learned that I am not a neurotypical. I'm neurodivergent, and that is, you know, this, I suppose, this kind of, it's a gut feel. It's and I struggle to articulate it actually, but I feel creative, I feel language, I feel design, and I think that's the bit that makes me really good actually at the kind of the advertising side of my role. That's something I enjoy, but it's something that I think I've got this really inherent kind of creativity around. And actually I was speaking to our creative director at Lucky Generals, our advertising agency. He's not been diagnosed with ADHD, but believes he has, and is very open about that. And actually he and I bounce so well off each other in those kind of conversations, because our minds jump and work in the same way. So I think that feels like I've gone on a meandering journey there, because there have been challenges along the way, and I feel like I've made it sound like it's all brilliant and hunky-dory now. But I think fundamentally it's kind of, the journey has all been about, it's made sense of my entire life. And as I said, given me that kind of just fundamental self-belief that I think I see so many other people have, and I've always kind of wondered why I haven't had it.
Mel, honestly, thank you for really just sharing that. And I'm genuinely so pleased that you've reached this point, because like you said, the meanderingness must have taken a long time. As you say, you've reached this point only at this, you know, at this moment in your life. So there must have been so many questions that you just had, you know, during the course of your early stage and your early days in your life that you just perhaps couldn't get to grips with, and now you know why and what. I mean, it's just incredible. And I'm sure lots of people listening into this might kind of go, wait a minute, I can relate to this. Like, am I kind of, you know, doing myself a disservice right now by not investigating this area further?
Yeah.
It's absolutely, it's really kind that you would share that. I want to ask you, and I know before we even started the conversation, you already said that, you know, we start early mornings here, but you said that you've already been doing, you know, you already started a couple of hours ago. And to that extent, always on. And then you mentioned, you know, the problem with that is, of course, it leads to the flip side, which is burnout. And I just wonder if there is how do you reconcile those two? Because you clearly still, as by your own admission, maybe that's your alarm going off there.
It was.
But by your own admission, you know, you talk about, you know, the fact that you're always on, but then how do you avoid burnout?
So I think what I have learned is that I am much better these days at knowing my limits. And I think that's possibly just an age thing to a degree as well. But I think I make sure that I have some downtime, and that might be on a Sunday. I am staying in bed until I feel like getting up, actually, whether that's awake or asleep. So I don't have a kind of a set routine in the way that I do it, because I don't necessarily need it kind of on a daily basis, as I know some of my kind of friends and colleagues do. But I think I'm much better at listening to myself these days. And I also have an amazing husband who will every so often kind of sit on my shoulder and point out that I might be getting up to here and I probably need to take it down a notch. So and then the other thing is, and up until recently I've been fairly good at doing it. Running is my, I suppose, meditation, because I've actually tried meditation on many occasions, because I actually believe in the science behind it, and there's quite a lot that shows it can help someone with an ADHD brain. I just struggle with it. But running is the thing that kind of helps me switch off, process, and it's often the time when I will often stop and email myself mid-run, because it's the time when all my thoughts will kind of just coalesce, come together, because I've switched myself down a bit. So it's very much I just respond when I need to these days, and recognise it more than I used to.
Now, Mel, I want to talk a little bit about bravery. It was a brave moment to stand up at that Wackle dinner and say what you said, but it leads to opportunity, and the ... is obviously we're here and you're telling your story. So I want to find out, what are some of the braver things that you've done in your career?
I think actually, probably the bravest thing I've done is recognising and acknowledging that a job that I'm doing or an organisation I'm working in isn't right for me, and probably stepping off that cliff, as I've kind of called it in the past, is it is and also not necessarily with something to go to, because it's just felt like the right thing to do, and it kind of does hark back to what I said before. It's funny how some of your earlier career experiences shape you, but I think that whole experience of essentially everyone in Safeway head office being made redundant probably set me up for a certain view of the world, and I've kind of a little bit of a mantra that I have is this too shall pass, and therefore I suppose it always feels better to be in control and take control of something. So it's more from that kind of angle, I suppose, rather than anything that I feel like I've done that is brave in terms of some marketing work per se.
Well, we're coming to the end of the segment now, and perhaps the last question. I would love to just ask, what do you think you'd like your legacy to be?
If you'd asked me that a year ago, I wouldn't have had an answer, I don't think. But I am really clear that on the journey that I am going on with ADHD, is I really want to champion neurodiversity I think in the organisations I work in, but more specifically within the kind of the marketing industry and the advertising industry, and I suppose shift perceptions, probably in the more corporate environment, that there is one way of being and thinking, that means you have to write things in a certain way or do things in a certain way, and actually it's about cultural add rather than cultural fit. I think I feel so passionately about it, and I think interestingly, the more you get into the advertising side of marketing, I think the more neurodiversity is already becoming and is more accepted, because I think actually it's a place where people with a neurodiversity often find themselves. But I would love to draw on that, and actually I'd love to kind of make that that kind of connection and network for people. And I mean, you know, Mark, you mentioned Jeremy before we started this, but I think kind of joining those dots and being a big part of that would be something I'd be incredibly proud of.
And so you should, and so you will. And if you want any help on that crusade, personally happy to be involved. It's been brilliant to have you on, Mel. It's personally, I've really enjoyed your candor and honesty and insight. And so I'm just going to do a bit of a recap of the things that I've taken away. So it was really interesting to hear about what might not make sense, but makes absolute sense about the need for structure and turbulence simultaneously in helping to get the best out of you and your brain. There's a very much an undercurrent of humility. I fell into this and this was all quite normal. But, let's remind ourselves, you're marketing director of the Co-op and you've had an illustrious career in retail marketing. So that's a lovely side to you. We talked a bit about redundancy and how you took it in your stride. This too shall pass. I think that's a great message to normalize what can sometimes be seen as a taboo subject. And of course, we've talked about ADHD and the connections, the possibilities, the way that you feel creative, the way that you feel things, that underlying instinct. And with that, a greater self-acceptance. So I think that's probably the big thing that comes out of this. You seem at peace. I didn't know you when you weren't at peace with yourself, but it seems like you very much are, much more so than perhaps you were. Self-acceptance and belief. And it's, again, I'll say it, this is a great advert. You are a great advert for the fact that not for everybody, but for many people, neurodivergence, neurodiversity does bring superpowers to help people to be exceptionally successful, but in their own way and on their own terms. And so I'm very, very grateful for the time you've given us this morning, Mel. So that's my wrap. Over to you, Richie.
Just want to say how inspired I think the session has been, to be honest with you, Mel. It's been incredible. I mean, your ability to just be so down to earth and just be truthful about your feelings is really rare, quite frankly, in today's world from leaders like yourself. People will kind of listening into this and going, I don't hear this from anybody at the top, really. And so it's just really nice that you've been so honest about everything. And I really hear you about the meditation thing, by the way. I too are really big jogging buff, and it struck me when you were saying that. I thought I'd add that maybe you should try doing walking meetings. I don't know if you do, but walking meetings are so therapeutic as well in being able to kind of continue with that flow as it was. And that's been really helpful to me as part of my journey in this way. So, but nevertheless, look, it's been absolutely brilliant, and I really wish you all the best in that building of the legacy, as it were. I think it's a really worthwhile cause. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to give walking meetings another go, Richie. Fab.
Thank you, Mel.